Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is the first edition of Crypto Talk. It's a format that we thought we should do because crypto, is a difficult one to wrap your head around, and it's never stopping, and it's growing so fast. So, hopefully it's going to be the first of many. The whole Web3 thing and the whole crypto thing, as I mentioned, it's super fascinating and constantly evolving. I've been hooked myself since 2016 on the topic. Once I understood the blockchain for the first time, I was like, wow, this can help in so many things. And just think of all the free time we could all have if the blockchain is actually doing its thing. And the best we can do and is learn, of course. That's what I recommend to everybody. Just read about it, watch videos, and then also exchange about it with other people because that's the best. Then at this point, thank you so much to the whole GenTwo team, Philip, of course, our CEO, and Benji, Noel, Mario, and of course Nicola, who helped putting this all together. Thank you very much. And as I'm here already and we're in the GenTwo office, I want to take the opportunity and speak maybe 5 minutes about GenTwo and what we do. And it's quite complex actually. So many people still don't understand, or it's always a hard one to explain what we do because the solution is quite complex and we solve so many things. So I try to do it in my own words and maybe a bit differently than what you've seen on our websites or presentations and so on. So I prepared 5 slides. So we have really democratized the issuance of financial products. And through that, new markets are born. And this is really, really exciting because financial products have only been accessible and doable for banks and other financial intermediaries, but not really for the average asset manager or the average person that is ambitious about something. And we're doing this through off-balance sheet securitization and a legal framework that we offer turnkey to our clients, and then on the other side, a fintech piece that we develop in-house. And also through the ecosystem that we built. You may have been to one of our asset rushes. We really foster and care about our ecosystem because together it's about innovation, especially in finance, and that's what we care an awful lot about. And maybe taking a step back and talking about securitization for the people that don't know, it's a very powerful tool for banks actually to wrap a single asset or multiple assets within a bankable security. And then it can be purchased and it becomes accessible through the banking framework. And that's super, super efficient. But the problem is, as a bank, and if you try to, or if you're securitizing through a bank, per design, the underlying asset, what you're securitizing, becomes part of the bank's balance sheet. And as the banks are so heavily regulated, they're somewhat handcuffed and they can't really be innovative anymore. So that's why the products that we have seen come out from banks, they are nothing new. They're usually on bankable assets like stocks and bonds, and they have been wrapped and re-wrapped, and there's no innovation, and also the margins for the asset managers are shrinking. And that's why an off-balance sheet solution that we set up for our clients is so helpful, because it brings an awful lot of new possibilities of financial products that you can create, and it doesn't interfere with any regulation. Like if you're a bank, you don't have to worry about putting it onto your balance sheet. You can just put it off balance sheet, and that's ultimately also really good for the end investors because they're buying into an asset-backed security. And they don't have to worry, for instance, about the issuer risk, which we have seen in some prominent examples, like Lehman Brothers, for instance. It was not pretty what happened in 2008, and we are segregating the risk between many, many, many issuers that we have set up. That being said, we can do 3 certificate types today. The first one being the tracker certificate, the simplest form. I give you an example, a Bitcoin tracker certificate. It follows or shadows the price of a single underlying, like Bitcoin or any other underlying for that matter. And the second one is the actively managed certificate. As the name implies, there's an active strategy behind it. It's fund-like in its economic outcome. Very different from a fund, but very cool and a super efficient tool, and actually the most commonly used tool. and then the credit-linked note. So that's cool if you have a project and you need financing, and instead of going to a bank and getting a loan, you can wrap your business case into a bankable certificate, and through the sale of that certificate, you can actually raise the money that you need, and then you deploy it to your company or project that needs the money. And for whom are we doing this? For asset managers, family offices, banks, venture capitalists, brokers, private equity companies, basically any sort of financial intermediary that you can think of can use our services. Then GenTwo and GenTwo Digital in numbers today. It was a beautiful journey since 2018 when we started. So today we have 2.1 billion US dollars in assets under service, split out between roughly 200 clients and partners that we have. We have about 7% market share here in Switzerland of all the financial intermediaries. And we issued more than 700 products to date. And here the product types, as I mentioned, the AMC being the most prominent one, roughly 60%, the tracker being the second most popular one, 26%, and then the credit-linked note. And the market types that we are serving is, the biggest one still being the public markets like stocks and bonds, private equity, digital assets like crypto, and the hybrid products that we do. Here a glance at our ecosystem, our amazing partners and clients over here, just a selection of them, many of which we are also not allowed to show because we are a white label enabler, so we give anybody who wants this platform and they can use it for their own purposes. So some of our clients wish not to be, here pointed out, but some of them do. And also talking about media, we have been very present and very active because we like to, because we want to take the innovation that happens in the financial markets with our clients, and we want to share the stories because that has not really been possible before, because banks, they had this tunnel vision, they're not allowed to share any information usually, and now that we democratize this whole sector, we like to talk about the projects that we do. And the client structure, 50% roughly are asset managers and family offices, 34% banks, brokers, and exchanges, and 16% make up for the venture capitalists and others. And that's the last slide already, so I wanted to point out some advantages from an AMC versus traditional structures like a fund, for instance. The AMC is extremely flexible and customizable, so you can really choose which counterparty you want to use, for instance, for custody or brokerage, so on and so forth. Also, the payoff mechanisms are completely up to you, so you're really your own designer of your AMC and how it works. Then also the AMC is not part of the collective investment scheme, which a fund, for instance, is, and that implies a whole set of complications in the fund world. The AMC is fund-like in its economic outcome, but it's not part of the collective investment scheme. I don't want to go too much into detail, but the bottom line is that the end investors buying into a certificate or a note, as you could also call it, they own a claim on the performance of the underlying. They don't actually own the underlying. The underlying is always 100% owned by the issuance vehicle or the SPV that we specifically set up for every single one of our clients. Then another advantage is the time to market. Time to market is crucial, especially in the investment world. There are certain opportunities that you want to capture, and then you got to be fast. Cost, of course, and also the handling of an AMC is super easy compared, for instance, to a fund. If you pay back a certificate, it vanishes automatically. A fund you have to close down, and corporate actions, so on and so forth. Management fee, performance fee, all of the above are completely up to you and tailor-made by you. So it's your securitization platform that you get, and you don't have to obey by anybody's rules. So it's all entirely up to you. That's probably one of my favorite topics here. So the subscription mechanism. So if you have, for instance, a crypto fund today, usually it's set up either in the Caymans or wherever, but the subscription mechanism usually is still a wire transfer. Now, from an asset management perspective, a wire transfer is a painful thing to do because you have an asset outflow, meaning you do a wire transfer into somebody else's account, and then the money is off your balance sheet, so to speak. And yes, you have a fund unit in exchange, but it's out of your bank accounts. And that's exactly what we solve, because through the ISIN number, the securities number, which we can get either a Swiss ISIN or now also an XS, an international security number, you can actually buy this product via the bank, meaning you can give the ISIN to your relationship manager at the bank, or you can do it even online, and then the money, so to speak, stays in your account. It just moves from the cash down to where the structured products are, and that's super cool. And you have the feeling the money is still there. So just think, any investment idea that you can think of, we can wrap it up and make a bankable security out of it. And that's the democratization that we are pushing. All right, so that was it. Thanks for bearing with me. And now we are coming to our panel. The panel is about Web3 and all the beautiful things that come with it. It's affecting many of us and our businesses, so it's certainly a thing we should all talk about. And I'm extremely honored to have amazing panelists here today that are industry experts. And the goal today will be to share our knowledge, our common knowledge that we have, to answer your questions that you have, and to take tools and talking points back home or to your office so you can talk, to your colleagues and friends, so we can keep this up. So the first panelist is Sarah. Welcome, Sarah. I'll give you a hand.
Maybe not the best shoes. I don't know where I can stand here.
Anywhere you want. Yeah. So Sarah, she's with Metaco, an amazing company in the space that enables lots of banks and big institutions to get crypto ready. Maybe you want to introduce yourself quickly and give.
I'm Sarah. I'm a business development director for Metaco. I'm serving the Swiss market, but also the Nordic market. And I will explain you, hopefully not in too many sentences, what the custody is about. And I believe just this space is extremely cool. The journey started at University of St. Gallen, where I researched on the topic of blockchain. I wrote my master thesis about it. Will be published soon, hopefully. I think everyone who knows how the technology is working is amazed by what it can do and what innovation power it has. Happy to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you so much for coming. Then the next one is Mark Hussein from PwC. You also need a hand? Yes. I mean, I think there's nobody that knows more about crypto regulation and all the complicated things that go along with it. So very happy to have you on stage and to ask you some questions later on.
Not too difficult, hopefully.
Or you also want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks very much. Yes, I'm Mark Hussey. I'm the director at PwC in the consulting practice. Got into crypto and blockchain in 2019, supporting the DM project, which hasn't gone brilliantly well, but it was certainly an interesting experience and lots of other good experiences since then. So nice to be here.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, David Long from CVVC. Crypto Valley Venture Capital. It's right. The most famous tongue breaker, I think, in Crypto Valley. It's a tough one to pronounce. Sometimes.
Only the first time, and then you will get it right.
And yes, I would even consider you guys as one of the founding fathers of the Crypto Valley. I mean, you have been there from the beginning with the awesome people behind you. So big respect and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And maybe also you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Sure, absolutely. And CVVC, or will we get into that afterwards?
Both, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So name's David Long, head of investments at CVVC. Been with the firm for about a year now. Before that, I was asset manager running a fund in Boston for the last 10 years. CVVC, so we are the first venture capital firm in Crypto Valley investing exclusively in blockchain technology. Founded in 2016, we made our first investments in 2019, and we launched our venture fund in 2020. Since that time, we've made 51 investments across 21 countries in 4 continents in 12 different industries. So it's been a very exciting go. What we really look to do, though, is we recognize that where we are now with blockchain, I think there's a lot of ecosystem building that is required, and it takes a lot of support on different angles. You need support in building relationships with institutions. You also need to have a home for these startups that are building these next generation technologies that haven't necessarily been adopted. And for that, we have CV Labs. So for those of you who are familiar, CV Labs and CVVC are one company. They are under the same umbrella. CV Labs is our ecosystem. It wouldn't even be fair to say ecosystem manager. They are ecosystem genius. They are the ones that build all the relationships with the large institutions. They're the ones that run our incubation program, put out the research reports along with PwC. Any partners that want to come in and be a sponsored partner of Crypto Valley and CV Labs, you get first dibs on anything that is coming through Crypto Valley. So even if we don't see as many people building in Crypto Valley as we previously did, everything is still flowing through the global hub of blockchain. So those types of institutions are Visa. They're one of our partners. Or you're seeing that larger banks are coming in. Google is another one of our partners. All of these individuals want first access, and they were major sponsors of the recent Crypto Valley Summit, which I'm sure all of you have heard of, as that was just 2 weeks ago. So it's been a very, very exciting run, and we are very optimistic for what's to come.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Maybe staying at the topic, and that's actually my first question on the list here. So what business cases is CVVC investing in? Is there a trend that you can?
Yeah, so it's really, so the different verticals, that's pretty broad. As I mentioned, we've invested in 12. But we invest more in the utility, and I think that we're probably going to get into this a little bit more, but we've always said that we invest in utility over speculation. So what that means is our venture investments are investing in the equity of companies that are building real applications to solve enterprise or corporate problems, as opposed to investing in cryptocurrencies that go through the moon, like Dogecoin, and then they tank and then they go up and down. We're looking for companies that are utilizing blockchain technology to build out an application that could not be solved before blockchain technology. And now, as we're getting more involved with these institutions, you're seeing really that the institutions are starting to adopt this. And even if you take the top 10 companies in the stock market by market cap, you see that every single one of them is using blockchain technology, or at least exploring blockchain technology. And that says a lot, because that's more than just tech. It's very heavy tech based, but you have Saudi Aramco as the one and only oil company that is still in the top 10, and they're looking at ways that they can use blockchain technology so that nobody's tampering with their infrastructure. And so this is really showing us that this is the place to be. We believe that the next wave of IPOs is going to come from blockchain. And that's a bold statement, but that's what we firmly believe. And we're already starting to see that. We have 15 unicorns, so companies valued at more than $1 billion straight just here from Crypto Valley. The 15th, which actually hasn't been announced, is one of our own. So we're very proud of that. And that's a lot of growth in just the recent time.
Wow, sounds amazing. Thanks for sharing. Then over to you, Mark. So how do you see the current Web3 landscape? And
Yeah, absolutely. And I take it a bit more from a financial services perspective. And we did a survey earlier this year, and 97% of financial services leaders and executives thought that DLT and blockchain was going to be transformational. And I think that very much echoes your statement. I think the only gap maybe is that traditional financial services hasn't really been involved. Only a third actually offer crypto exposure at the moment. So there is a gap between knowing that this is coming and then actually doing something about it. I think from a PwC perspective, where we've been consulting companies, is a lot to do with the startups, people looking to do asset management in the country, some DeFi platforms as well. But traditional financial services have been a bit slower on the uptake. Definitely coming, and probably certainly looking at another one of our points was around where do they go? What's the sort of the building blocks, and what are the foundations? The financial institutions know that custody is certainly one of the main things that they need to do before they then start really sort of investing in more of a tokenization, which they know is important and will become important, but maybe for a later point.
Absolutely. And now that we mentioned custody, I mean, Metaco is doing an amazing job at serving custody, for instance. So, what do your clients care most about currently?
So yeah, I mean, I have a bit a different view on the market since I'm really in the custody market, and we get a bit of a different experience because we are talking to banks on a global scale. We're talking to all the Tier 1 banks, and actually we have also partnered with most of the Tier 1 banks. I mean, those announcements were quite recently, but what we see is that almost all the banks are actually building teams, so they're considering the topic. I think most of them are a bit lost still. I mean, there is a lot of knowledge they need to catch up, and I think it's also the combination of consulting companies, us, and other players in the market who take over that role in consulting them and telling them what is important. And we see that they really want to build an offering because they see that a lot of assets will be on chain in the future. Not everyone is going in the same direction. I mean, I have one prospect, they're totally going into tokenization only, which is also very interesting in my opinion. But it all comes down to custody. I mean, it doesn't really matter what kind of assets you look at. If they're on chain, you need to have an infrastructure to support that. And this is where we come into the game. I believe we have built a lot of knowledge in-house because Metaco was built actually quite a few years ago. It was built in 2015 in Lausanne. And they really put their heads together with the banks. We always had banks sitting with us on the table and really looking at what do we need and what kind of infrastructure makes it possible for us as banks. But we're not only serving banks, we serve all kinds of organizations, but banks are the first ones to move, usually. And now we have this solution, we have an infrastructure that really enables them to safe keep the private keys for their customers. So if you, for example, look at a bank who has been doing custody with traditional assets, I mean, there is really a lot of interest in doing the same for on-chain assets, and then they need an infrastructure for that. And you asked me what criteria are important for our customers. I mean, you see this space and you see all those hacks. I mean, it's a fact. We have a lot of hacks in this industry. And this really brings me to this one and only point, and that's security. I mean, you need to have a secure solution. And of course, you can say, okay, we're going to outsource the custody. And I think a lot of players are doing that because it seems easy, and it's for sure also an easy solution and a good solution. But in the end, if you want to be the trusted party for your customers, for your clients, you want to do the safekeeping of the keys yourself. And for this, we help them. And I think we are very good positioned with Metaco because we have been partnering with IBM very long. And together with IBM, I mean, this will not say a lot to you, but we reached the highest standard according to the US government computer security standard, FIPS 140-2. I don't know if you know that. So we reached a level 4. And I mean, yeah. And I think this is important, and what's also very important, in my opinion, we talked before, and I said that before, you need to be agnostic. I mean, you need to be future-proof, because you don't know where the market is going. You don't know which key management solution will be the most secure one in the future, right? So you want to have a solution infrastructure that is agnostic and that is future-proof, which means API first. The architecture should be set up in a way that you can integrate all kinds of third-party providers, so you can have kind of like a best of breed approach, and you need to be agnostic against the key management solution, because you want to mix maybe hot, warm, maybe a third-party provider too, and orchestrate everything under one hat. And this is what Metaco is offering to our clients. And I think this is also why we won most of the big RFPs. I mean, those were quite long, trust me. I didn't do them myself, but I saw them, and it's really what they value the most. I hope my answer was not too long.
No, it was perfect, because my follow-up question was what sets your offering aside from everybody else, but I guess the answer to that would be the highest security standard. Or is there anything else that sets you aside from everybody else?
No, for sure, the highest security standard is really what is a good kind of also selling point. But in my opinion, what really is awesome with Harmonize, the name of our platform, is that it is future-proof because it is agnostic to all kinds of key management systems. I mean, if you, for example, have a global business and you operate in different kinds of jurisdictions, the regulations won't be the same. So you might need another approach for custody in Turkey or wherever you are. So, for example, in Turkey, you need to have it on-prem, and we can offer to have everything on-prem. You can even have your own hardware security module in your basement and use that one together with our platform. And I think this is really why I'm also working at Metaco, actually. I'm very convinced, and I'm very happy that I am working for Metaco because I truly believe in the future of it.
Awesome. Well, that's good. So, Mark, what are the challenges that your clients are facing, and what are the obstacles? Yeah?
I would certainly reflect what Zara was mentioning. The knowledge gap is certainly a big one. I certainly agree that the appetite is definitely there. We're speaking to lots of players who definitely want to get involved in the space, and there's workshops and strategy. But I think the overriding element is trying to gain knowledge. I think a lot of the execs. And part of our survey, we had over 50% rate their own knowledge as poor or needing improvement. And I think when you've got that at the very top, it's difficult to get the budgets, it's difficult to get the buy-in, the sponsorship for even investigating what digital assets looks like, what sort of services and products you could offer. So I think knowledge is definitely a big hurdle. Reputational risk, I think, is also something. Mentioned hacks before. I think there is still a bit of a hangover from expecting that crypto and digital assets is a money laundering thing. I think that still, unfortunately, does exist. And then also with some of the recent fallout with 3 Arrows and the Luna DPEG, I think, again, that's just sort of dented some of the enthusiasm in the market, which was sort of growing in Q1, Q2, and driving a lot of conversations. And then finally, the regulatory aspect, as you mentioned, I think that's another one which is very tricky. I think within an individual location, and Switzerland's a perfect example, the regulatory environment here is very good, very stable, very clear. The regulators very pragmatic and welcoming, I think. Whereas I think a lot of more of the global players have got much more of a regulatory mosaic to try and fit around them, whether that's custody or whether that's issuance, the type of tokens, the characteristics. I think that also holds them back from that perspective. So.
Absolutely. Well, regulation is so important, but yet it's also challenging because, you want to be compliant, but then it hinders you from moving fast, of course, like if you want to be always 100% compliant. So, I
exactly
can only
right.
imagine.
But it's certainly very important for trust in the market. I think that's where, particularly in financial services, it's where it has to go. Even sort of the DeFi acting outside of regulation, how much scope is there for that in the longest term? I'm not super convinced, because we need to build that trust when we're issuing financial products.
Maybe I can just add one thing that I
Please,
think is quite interesting.
Go
And
ahead.
it's actually so people always say that history repeats itself, or it rhymes, and we hear that comment a lot. And I think that what has happened recently, while some of the governments around the world are trying to figure out how do we play nice with crypto, if they haven't, there's a few countries that have just said we're banning it, but it's because they're fearful that they don't know how they're going to have control. Where at least with CBVC being such a centralized brand in Crypto Valley, we have the opportunity, or we're fortunate enough to meet with some governments, U.S. Congress, the delegation from Vietnam. I'm throwing these names out because from around the world, there are governments trying to figure out how to do this. With the fall of Terra Luna, it's not too different from how we've seen some of the falls of the big .com companies. And now we still have the internet here today. What's important, though, is we have to give a lot of credit to what Switzerland has done, because even though they want to make sure that they are compliant, they are still very open to this technology, and they want to be supportive of this. And if you look at that, the World Wide Web, or rather the internet, was founded 30 years ago in the CERN Institute. No companies in Switzerland came out of that. Okay, maybe a few startups, but can you name one company that came out of it that's still a player today? I'm happy to be wrong, but I don't know any, and I haven't been told of any. But what's impressive is that since Crypto Valley has been there, We have, it's been a handful of years, maybe close to 8 to 10 years that's really been known. It employs 6,000 people, there's over 1,100 companies, and there's 15 unicorns, as I mentioned before. I mean, that's pretty impressive and where we see that this is going. And we're still in early days here.
Very impressive, yeah. Yeah, sticking to CVVC here for a second. I mean, I'm curious, is there like a focus or a geographical area, or like where do you see the most potential currently?
Yeah, so I said before that we invest globally, but what we recognize is that we need to have, we haven't invested in Asia at all, and it's not because we don't want to invest in those projects. It's actually quite the opposite, but we don't know that market. We don't have anybody there that's boots on the ground. So we have, of course, headquarters is here in Zug. We have an office in Liechtenstein, Berlin, and we have a growing office and a growing team down in South Africa. Now, if I focus on Africa for a minute, Africa is the perfect continent for blockchain technology. All of the things that is going on in terms of infrastructure, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of political or fair politics, or I guess a better way to say is the issue of corruption. All of these things have kept the different countries throughout Africa from prospering. Now you come along with a technology that you can be run from your cell phone. You have entrepreneurs that are able to run their entire business through the economics of tokenomics, through mobile finance applications. All of this is really, really impressive. And the growth that we've seen in Africa, we wanted first mover advantage there. And so while we are looking at other places in the world, we knew that we could always go to the United States, or rather North America, later, because that market exists, and that's saturated with venture capitalists. But anywhere that we go into, we go with government support. So with the support of the Swiss government, with SECO, we went into South Africa first to see where could we really apply and incubate and build a community and an ecosystem around blockchain technology. And that was nearly 5 years ago. And now today we have a team of 8 people down there. And in the new year, we're going to be launching our first fund only focused on the equity of blockchain technology companies in the African region. So all very, very exciting things there. Aside from that, I mentioned before that we invest in the utility over speculation. 95% of our investments have been in the equity of companies that are building application. But recognizing that we're Crypto Valley Venture Capital, we started making investments into some private token. And we hired 2 guys that are crypto native. They know the space. They were previously consultants working on tokenizing projects or working on projects that within that world, they know it in and out. So in the last 12 months, we've made 6 investments into private tokens, not anything liquid, only in things that have strong communities. The due diligence is very similar to how you would look at any private company. You look at what the strength of the community is. How is this going to scale? What does the technology look like? And so with that, we're going to be launching our Web3 private token fund. And then kind of to add on one more thing, we are going to be launching our Vintage 2 equity fund, which is going to be a much larger fund. That's going to happen probably the latter half of 2023. While I'm talking on the products, I have to give credit to GenTwo, because our original fund was an AMC. So that's how we opted to do that. And from the user's perspective, it was the perfect toolkit for us, because it was a first-time fund, and we recognized that being able to raise capital kind of on an ongoing basis, rather than just having a capital commitment in the beginning and then having capital calls throughout, we were able to leave it open until we were going to close the fund, which we're going to do at the end of December this year. But that was a very nice and seamless way for us to get a product spun up and to get these very early stage assets inside of that. So that's been really great. And then we also recognize that we have to bridge a gap between the old economy and the new. So we are a venture capital firm, but we need to provide other avenues or other bridges for investors to get into digital assets and get into Web3. So we do run a hedge fund-to-fund product that is focused on using the hedge fund strategies to invest in digital assets. So really, there's a lot of arbitrage out there in its early days, and so we were able to spin that product up with GenTwo as well. So I have to give some credit to all the abilities that you guys have given us.
Awesome, thank you very much. Yeah, then over to you, Sarah. I mean, what has been happening the past recent months in crypto wasn't pretty, and it's been certainly a rough time. So what's your take on the whole situation right now?
Well, actually, I can begin with a story. So I joined 4 months ago, so I'm quite new at MetaCo. And the second day I joined, my ex-boss called me and he was like, "Did you see the Bitcoin price drop?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Yeah, maybe you will be unemployed soon." And I'm like, "Okay, that's a great start. Thank you, ex-boss." So no, actually, I don't feel like this is only bad. I mean, for sure, if you are invested, you don't want to look at your portfolio right now, especially if you are not one of the early investors. But I believe, I mean, you talk now a lot about innovation and innovative projects, and I believe this is really what's happening right now, because before there was a lot of noise about this investing in Bitcoin and Ether, and it was kind of like, it seemed more like gambling to me, and I believe the true value is in the innovative aspect of the whole story. And now, since the noise is a bit calmer, I think it's great also that business models who were not secure, who did not have a sustainable character, blew up and disappeared, because better sooner than later. And I think it's also good that we see now what criteria are important, security is important, and that we build business models that are sustainable and where we can all profit from. Because the innovation that comes from blockchain and distributed ledger technologies is for sure, and now we just need to capitalize on it. And this is an iterative process, and yeah, it's actually in bear markets where innovation happens. So yeah, we should all keep going.
Well said.
I think so too. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, then Mark, how do you see it? I mean, also taking into consideration the whole regulatory situation, like everybody's trying to play catch up. So what's your take?
No, and I think it's well reflected as well in the sense of I don't want to say any of these falls wouldn't have happened without regulation, but I think that's where we can help to bring trust in the market and prevent some of these business models that we always knew were going to be unsustainable in a bear market, or when tokens start to dip a bit in value. I echo your point as well, David, where countries and different regulators have been quite fearful of it. Again, maybe lacking the knowledge of knowing where and how to regulate, I think has been an issue. But again, I think given where the market is now and seeing the appetite, seeing the number of projects, it's not going away. People can't afford to turn a blind eye and just not regulate this space. It has to come, and the big regulators are starting to do that. We've seen MiCA was published this week. I haven't read through it just yet. It's hundreds and hundreds of pages, but looking forward to the summaries that come out in another week's time if you're interested in that sort of thing. Obviously, I mentioned the Swiss regulators before. I think they do a very good job with same risks, same rules, and sort of leading up to a sort of more of a principles sort of approach. And the US launched some stablecoin regulation or stablecoin guidelines, and it's definitely coming. It's definitely coming. And I think it's definitely good for the industry to make sure we're still around in 10 years' time.
I think so too. And maybe David, you have or your stance on the current situation, and where do you think it's going to go within the next couple of months?
Yeah. So the only killer app that we've really seen, application that we've really seen from blockchain so far has been NFTs. That's the only major thing that's really hit the mainstream.
Bitcoin, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, besides the cryptocurrencies themselves, but the application of blockchain, the hype was really around NFTs. I don't think that we have seen what NFTs is going to become in 5-10 years, right? And that's not me saying, oh, I think NFTs is the greatest idea that's out there. But there's many use cases. I mean, pick any industry out there, there's a use case that blockchain can provide. And seeing that now, and seeing the type of projects that are being built out, or seeing the type of solutions that are going to hopefully change the African continent, where I think a lot of investors have said, yeah, this is the technology, artificial intelligence, or the internet is going to change, and it hasn't really worked out, except now you're starting to see increases in additional investment money going in, and you're starting to get reward for that, but reward from the infrastructure being built out and the rewards back to the people there. But blockchain can help anybody in any geography and any economic standing. So I'm really looking forward to what's going to be built both locally and globally.
Same here, for sure. Yeah, I think this is the time where we can also accept some questions from the audience. So do you have any questions you want to ask to our amazing panelists here that have all the insights? Yeah, the microphone is coming. And then also say who you want to address the question to, and then let's take it from there.
I'd like to ask a question to Sarah with respect to, especially since you're dealing with large-scale financial institutions, what do you see these institutions venture out to? Are they rather looking into applications in crypto-native territory, or are they looking to make internal processes more efficient and build lasting infrastructure for the long term?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I'm still trying to figure that out because it's really dependent on where you are. I mean, if you look at the Nordic market where I'm also active, I see a lot of activities in CBDCs. And I also truly believe, I mean, 80% of all central banks are considering issuing either a wholesale or retail CBDC in the next few years. So this is for sure something that everyone should be considering. But from another perspective, I mean, yeah, I mentioned this one tokenization case. I believe this is very interesting, but I think also tokenization of bonds and of securities is a big thing. It's also, I think the big players, they are, I mean, for sure, first they want to offer Bitcoin and Ether, really easy on-ramp, off-ramp, but then also, yeah, keeping it a bit low on crypto, because crypto, the word crypto is not really only positively seen in the space. But yeah, everyone is like, yeah, ideating. And I think when they see the big players doing the first step on a big scale, a lot will follow. So I think they're a lot just waiting for this big movement of the big players. Because I hear that a lot, they want to do something, but they want to wait, they don't want to be the first movers. And then there are some more innovative companies, they want to be the first movers, and then you will see this kind of like move in one direction. It's still quite open, in my opinion.
I'd probably echo the same. I think I haven't seen many people using blockchain as an operational efficiency within the banking environment. It's much more about revenue driving and looking to offer client exposure and trying to gain additional wallet share. I think for the time being, given the knowledge gap and where do you start if you can drive top line, I think that's probably where people are more focused.
Except of the central bank. Because wholesale CBDCs, that's again about process efficiency. Yeah, I agree.
Thank you both.
Thank you. A question really for Mark on regulation. You mentioned that some jurisdictions kind of just wash their hands of it, others there's a lack of knowledge. But I mean, there are two aspects to this. The clear fear is around money laundering, clearly. And the second one is about really tax evasion. So the OECD recently has put out what they call some rules. They call it the CARF, the Crypto Asset Reporting Framework, which essentially is mirroring the CRS, but it's adding in transactional volumes and data. I mean, do you see, how is your feeling around how regulators are going to look at these? Because my fear is they will try and map them back, as they always do, to traditional assets they know and understand, and try and regulate in the same way, which is potentially going to give you all sorts of issues and probably will be the wrong sort of regulation.
Yes, quite. I mean, and there's so many things to that. I mean, at the moment, I see a lot of companies setting up in the BVI's, Seychelles, not through necessarily want of avoiding regulation. That's not really the goal. But given the lack of clarity, I think in the European and some of the other markets, they feel as though that's what they need to set up, and that's where they're safest. They've got their own director responsibilities, and they'd rather go in an environment where they can significantly overachieve what the bare minimum is, with a view that once things are a bit more stabilized in the likes of Europe, then re-onshore themselves and come and join and be able to actively target sort of local customers and that sort of thing. Otherwise, I think it's probably a long way off before we get regulations that best match the new technology. In some ways, given the way of some of the sort of market risk and the VAR calculations and how much capital you need to hold in your balance sheet, some of the classifications of the token types just really aren't representative of what the underlying sort of asset even is. I think that's partly why a lot of people shy away from tokenizing securities, because from a regulatory perspective, it then becomes a completely different animal and a much more of a crypto animal that no one wants to deal with, even though it's fundamentally the same type of asset. So I agree. We want to be encouraging innovation and making sure that we're in this. We've got regulation that matches this always-on, real-time settlement sort of infrastructure. But I think there's probably a long way to go before we get to those sort of problems. We want to solve some other ones first.
Maybe a short input from my side. So what I see is that, I mean, the tax issue is an issue for regulators, and I mean, it would be much easier for them if most of the people would keep their digital assets in a bank that they know and not on some kind of exchange where the assets are somewhere. So it makes it much more easier for the regulator to tax the digital assets if they're within a bank. So this makes them favoring solutions like, that banks are offering custody of digital assets to their clients. So we see that they're going in the favor of that.
So maybe a question to David. I don't know for whom it's the best, but if we're thinking a little bit, we have a little bit here now in this discussion. We have got the two worlds already within our own industries. They are also not met yet. We're trying to bridge the old world and the new one, but even here we see it. Regulated custody, the legal framework we talked about. But where does the Web3, NFT, and this type of new world, that is the one where we all have high hopes for, but we see that to be still by far the furthest of it. It's kind of the newest of the crypto world animals. But is there something that is already, that we have maybe missed? And can you see something which is making the story a little bit tangible?
Okay, so are you focusing specifically on NFTs or just broadly? Well, so one space big space that does a lot of revenue each year as a market is the gaming industry, and that was really a testing ground for the metaverse. And so in there, you're having much more rewards-based gaming, something we were talking about earlier, which is, I think, is an increasing theme that we're going to see. So inside of that, they're starting to employ more tokenomics, which is becoming a different space. But that doesn't include everybody. But where there's the different insurance companies, for example, they're looking at how can they use blockchain to try to combat fraud. Where is there innovation where they can look into what is being recorded or what is being submitted for a claim where there is fraud, and they lose so much money nowadays. There is something that can be done better. ESG is a big one. ESG right now, to be quite frank, because that was my background before in Boston, it's a box to check off so that your clients. But if you can use data that is out there and then use blockchain to confirm that that data really makes things ESG friendly, whether it's environmentally friendliness or it's supply chain, and you can say that there was no slavery in the supply chain in the production phase, or there is nothing malicious that is being used. These are very simple use cases that you're seeing today. From where it is going to go, there is an argument for blockchain in every single industry. How quickly that's going to be adopted, that remains the major question. But I think it's positive that you are seeing slowly that the banks and maybe other large institutions that I mentioned before, such as the Googles of the world, they're looking at how they can get involved. Right? When Goldman Sachs started offering loans that were collateralized by Bitcoin, that told us that not that they were coming out with a new product, or not that they were saying, okay, well, let's play friendly with the crypto market because it's what our customers want. Rather, they told us, or at least us people, that they're recognizing Bitcoin and cryptocurrency as a real asset, that they're willing to give out loans and take that in as collateral, when previously, for years and years and years, they have just said that, no, this is a fluke, it's never going to go anywhere, and oftentimes they still say it is. But on the back end, them, JP Morgan, all the big banks, they're using it in some capacity. I just think that the question is not if or when, but how fast.
Yeah, one more question? Okay, let's do it.
It's for you, Lucas. Thinking about projects like Centrifuge and how they tokenize real-world assets, just wondering what your views on that, given that there are clearly lots of differences, but from a functional perspective, a lot of your product has a lot of similarities with that. And so to get your view on that, and then also to ask, what would be the conditions for you from a regulatory standpoint in order to step into the space of tokenizing assets?
So a question to me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, very good question actually, because for us, GenTwo it's a utility. So we want to connect amazing projects with the investors, and for the time being, we found that the traditional security is just the most effective, because asset managers, which are the people that have all the money in the world, and the banks, they know how to deal with it, and that's very important, to be compliant or being in a framework that's everybody is comfortable with. So we have looked at tokenization. We have TokenGate, for instance, as well in our family of companies. We're also part of the Crypto Valley ecosystem, of course. And we have had actually some use cases where it made a lot of sense. So we have successfully issued a security in the form of a certificate and a token out of that same issuance vehicle. And then you ultimately give the investor the choice of what does he prefer. But to be honest, today, the token appetite is just not quite there yet, just because the end investors, the big ones at least, they don't have wallets out of which they can do investments out of. So for the time being, we are always open and we can do it, but there's no real appetite. And furthermore, we want to serve, I mean, crypto, retail people are so well served in crypto. Like everybody can go, like everybody in the room can buy crypto within 10 minutes via their phone. And we want to help institutionals to get access to that asset class. And I think that's our joint mission. I mean, we're all pulling on the same string here. I think we all believe that crypto is the future. It's a fair system that should be the way forward for humanity. And we want to get everybody comfortable. So for the time being, it's securities, but I think in 10 years from now, everything will be tokenized, and we will definitely be part of that game as well. Follow-up question? Yeah.
Yeah, the institutional side, yes, crypto we can get access to, but the AMCs, do you see retail people also getting access to it? We don't all have our own asset manager taking care of us.
Yeah, yes, no, very true, and also a good question, very timely, because we just a couple of weeks back announced our retail offering within GenTwo, so we can actually distribute these AMCs to also retail people, and then it gives you again the comfort of buying it via your bank yourself versus having to do a wire transfer somewhere. So yes, retail is also now possible with AMCs, also through GenTwo. And I guess with that, I mean, it has been a very long panel. We wanted to do 30, 40 minutes max. It's been almost an hour, if I'm not. Okay, wonderful.
Thank you. I have one question for David. As a VC investor, how do you see the difference in equity and token? I asked so because I used to see this question on internet, and I think that's super interesting, like equity or token. And I think by token maybe means governance token, that you can vote on how the project will develop. So I would appreciate if you could share your experience and thoughts on that.
Yeah, we're seeing a mix right now. It's still, at least in the incubation stage, many of the companies we invest in them through the equity, but we have a clause in the contract because they have plans to set up a token. So at the early stage, they're not quite sure if they want to go out and raise through tokens or if they want to still do equity. I think I need to be honest here. I think that the venture capital industry, it's going to change. It has, depending on who we're talking to, it has sometimes not the greatest reputation because the venture capitalists, they take a big chunk of somebody's hard worked company, and those are the real sharks. But so I think eventually we go the token route, but right now there's big questions on where is the value of the company going to sit. Because if you're asking me if I see the value sitting in a governance token, I don't. I see the value sitting in the same token that the founding team gets, or the token that they're giving to the team members, but also the early investors. But right now, we're talking to a lot of companies that have plans to set up a token, but they're also raising equity, but then they're going to set up a governance token, and then they're going to have a token for the founding members, and then it's like, oh, wait, hold on. They don't know today where the value is going to sit. That's what any investor is looking for. Where's the value in the company? They don't want to invest in something that's one day going to be essentially worthless. So it's going to evolve, we're going to see, but it's difficult to say how exactly it's going to play out.
Okay, then with that, I guess we close the panel. Thank you so much all for coming, and we will stick around, of course, for more questions, and you also have some drinks and food, so let's get into it. Thanks again.